There are as many as 6,116 villages around the UK, the vast majority of which you'll find surrounded by lush countryside and home to a wealth of captivating history and enchanting sights. Simply put, the UK is a nation overflowing with wonderfully picturesque villages, but in this video we're going to take a look at just 10 especially beautiful ones, and what they have to offer on a day out. Number 10. Ingleton, North Yorkshire. Situated right on the edge of the wild Yorkshire Dales, Ingleton is a moderately sized village home to about 2,000 people, and a wealth of beautiful nature and captivating history. A trip to Ingleton is always a day out well spent. Take a few moments to admire the views across Swiller Glen, spanned by a now abandoned railway viaduct, and over which there towers the historic St Mary's Church, notable for its 15th century tower and for its connections to the famed detective Sherlock Holmes. Arthur Conan Doyle was married in nearby Thornton in Lonsdale in 1885, and the vicar who officiated that wedding was a man called Todd Sherlock, who also served as the vicar at St Mary's in Ingleton. Conan Doyle was working on his first Sherlock Holmes novel at the time, and it's possible that the name was inspired by Todd Sherlock of Ingleton, while there's also a part of the village which is coincidentally named Holmes. There are plenty of beautiful streets, houses and pubs to admire on a walk around the heart of Ingleton, but the highlight of the village can be found just on its outskirts, that being the famous Ingleton Waterfalls Trail, an achingly pretty 5-mile route that takes in the views of no less than 6 waterfalls, as you climb up through lush forests towards the wild heights of the Yorkshire Dales. Number 9. Dorchester on Thames, Oxfordshire. Just over 8 miles south of the historic city of Oxford is the equally historic countryside village of Dorchester on Thames. A beautifully quaint village of around 1,000 people, Dorchester hides an illustrious history behind its picturesque timber-framed and thatched roof houses. For centuries, the village was an important thoroughfare for people travelling between London and Oxford, and that's why you'll find many historic pubs and coaching inns still standing in Dorchester on Thames, the oldest being the fetching George Hotel, originally built all the way back in 1495. But even more impressively, this Oxfordshire village once served as the capital of the Anglo-Saxon kingdom of Wessex, and that's why it's nowadays home to a surprisingly immense parish church, also known as Dorchester Abbey. Dorchester Abbey has a history dating all the way back to the 7th century, but the church that stands today is mostly a product of the 12th century, and you can admire its heritage and beautiful architecture from without and within, in a quiet corner of the village centre. In more recent times, Dorchester has been the venue for the World Poo Sticks Championships, as it lies on an important point of the River Thames, where upstream of Dorchester, the river is commonly referred to not as the Thames, but the Isis. Number 8. Whitehead, County Antrim. Across the Irish Sea is without doubt one of the most beautiful villages in all of Northern Ireland, Whitehead. Situated just 15 miles away from the capital of Belfast, the village of Whitehead is now protected in almost its entirety as an example of a historic Edwardian holiday resort. The colourful houses that line the seafront overlooking Belfast Lough are without a doubt a real highlight of the village, but a trip to Whitehead also allows you to stroll along the platforms of one of Northern Ireland's best preserved railway stations, built in the Victorian era and nowadays used regularly as a filming location in films and TV shows. A large village of over 3,000 people, most of Whitehead's roads are entirely residential, but between the houses you'll find hints to its history, the most unusual example being the remains of a 17th century castle known as Castle Chichester, which is now located in somebody's driveway, though you can look at it from the outside. And on the outskirts of the village are plenty of beautiful walking trails venturing deep into the boundless nature of County Antrim, the best being a stroll along the cliffs up towards the historic Blackhead Lighthouse, where you'll find yet more beautiful views across Belfast Lough, and on clearer days, even towards Scotland. Number 7. Staithes, North Yorkshire. Back in England, Yorkshire's famous Cleveland coast is littered with some of the most beautiful villages in the country, and Staithes is no exception. The village's name is pronounced Steers by locals, and it's a place where local life blends with flocks of tourists who come to visit, particularly in the summer. A historic fishing village situated between two mighty cliffs, Staithes is well known for its delightful beach, not huge in size, but often quieter than other strands along this stretch of coast. But even if you don't fancy dipping your teas in the North Sea water, there's plenty more to see around the village. Home to a maze of higgledy-piggledy streets and lanes that wind their way between colourful houses galore, Staithes is a wonderful place to get an idea of how historic fishing communities evolved through the centuries. And you can also find many intriguing landmarks, like the shop where the explorer Captain Cook used to work as a young man, and what's reputed to be the narrowest street in England. Elsewhere in the village, you'll find stunning views across Staithes Beck as it flows down from the North York Moors out to sea, and at low tide you can venture out onto the rocks beneath the cliffs for a spot of rock pooling. In short, Staithes is a quintessential summer destination that's always a joy to visit, but especially with the warm sun beating down from above. Number 6. Port Sunlight, Merseyside. Most of the villages we'll be talking about on this list are found in the midst of the UK's boundless countryside, but that's not what all of the country's villages are like. Port Sunlight, just across the Mersey from the city of Liverpool, is a fascinating example of a so-called model village, as it was laid out on an area of unused marshland at the turn of the 20th century by the Lever brothers, a pair of businessmen who were looking for a way to expand their soap-making business, producing a popular brand of soap called Sunlight. That's where the village gets its name from, and while it was originally designed with houses built specifically for workers at the nearby soap factory, nowadays it's a delightful suburban village on the Wirral Peninsula, with plenty of captivating landmarks, from the unusual historic-styled architecture to the expansive avenues and boulevards that were laid out by the Lever brothers. Elsewhere, you'll find the famous Lady Lever Art Gallery, which is home to an incredible collection of paintings, sculptures and more. While a few streets away, there's also the village's Hulme Hall, a local performance venue that was the site of Ringo Starr's on-stage debut with the Beatles back in 1962. Number 5. St Abbs, Scottish Borders. Windswept seaside villages are a staple of any trip around the UK, and there are few places more enchantingly windswept than the tiny fishing village of St Abbs, located on the craggy Berwickshire coast in southeast Scotland. Made up of a handful of streets situated in between perilous seaside cliffs, St Abbs is extremely small, and it originated simply as a place where fishermen from the inland village of Coldingham set up huts and later houses, which allowed them to spend more time working out at sea. Nowadays, St Abbs remains an active fishing settlement, and while you must certainly take a walk around its fetching harbour, make sure not to get in the way of any fishermen going about their business, as they make up the majority of the local population in the winter months. At other times of year, St Abbs is dominated by holiday homeowners and tourists, who visit not only for the village's beauty, but also for its recent starring role in the Hollywood blockbuster Avengers Endgame, which has increased the village's notoriety worldwide. Number 4. Robin Hood's Bay, North Yorkshire. Sticking with historic fishing villages, back down on the Yorkshire coast is perhaps the most beautiful and most captivating seaside settlement of all, the legendary Robin Hood's Bay. Its links with Robin Hood himself are full of mystery. Some say that the outlaw drove away a platoon of Viking raiders by the shore here, but there's plenty more to explore on a walk around the village. Situated at the bottom of a perilously steep road down from the top of the cliffs, Robin Hood's Bay is a popular holiday destination, but it retains its historic feel to this day, with no outsiders' cars allowed in, and only one paved road that leads from the cliffs down to the shore. Otherwise, you're on your own when it comes to a walk around Robin Hood's Bay. Most of its cobbled, stepped lanes and alleys are too small to be marked on the map on your phone. So there's nothing better to do than start walking and just get lost. You'll certainly be delighted with whatever you find. The confusing, labyrinthine layout of the village is entirely deliberate though, as for a long time, Robin Hood's Bay was a notorious hive of smuggling. Illegal goods brought into England from continental Europe would arrive under the shadow of the cliffs to the harbour, after which point they'd be taken through this secret tunnel and then dispersed across the country. If a policeman ever tried to catch a smuggler, they'd simply disappear into the village's maze of streets, never to be seen again, most likely hiding in somebody's house, as for a long time, most people in the village were involved in smuggling. It's a swashbuckling place that's both beautiful and absolutely fascinating to visit, well worth the walk down from the car park or bus stop at the top of the cliffs. Number 3. Haworth, West Yorkshire. Often called Yorkshire's most beautiful village, Haworth is a historic, cobbled hilltop settlement that's absolutely brimming with history and picture postcard views wherever you look. The village's most popular spot is most certainly its sloping Main Street, which drops steeply down the hill from the heart of the village centre, and is lined with an array of delightful shops, galleries and pubs catering to visitors. But there are even more beautiful sights to be found around Haworth, from the narrow lanes that snake between the houses and the historic parish church, to the wide open views across the valley from Central Park, and the village's historic railway station, situated on a heritage line that famously starred in the classic film The Railway Children. Plenty of films and TV shows have used Haworth's beautiful streets, Main Street in particular, as a filming location, but the village is arguably best known for its association with the famous authors, the Bronte sisters, Anne, Emily and Charlotte, who grew up there in the early 19th century. The Bronte family are in fact so closely associated with Haworth and the surrounding area that this part of Yorkshire is now known as Bronte country, and in the village you'll find the school which the sisters attended, their old house, and many more stories that make a trip to Haworth like stepping back decades to their time. Number 2. Bamburgh, Northumberland. The North Northumberland coast is very possibly the most amazing stretch of coastline in England, home to everything from fascinating towns like Berwick-upon-Tweed to historic and windswept isles like the holy island of Lindisfarne. But the region's real highlight has to be the tiny village of Bamburgh, home to just over 400 people in the modern day. Made up of only a few streets and a sparse collection of houses, Bamburgh may not seem like a place with a lot to see at first. That is until you take a walk down its spectacular front street, which is dominated by the incredible Bamburgh Castle, an immense fortress situated atop an extinct volcano. Bamburgh Castle, which is still lived in by a family, is also open to visit for tourists, and it's a truly magical place, with a history dating all the way back to the 5th century AD, when this tiny village held the title of capital of the Anglo-Saxon kingdom of Bernicia. The castle is undoubtedly the highlight of a visit to Bamburgh, but the village is also home to a sprawling beach, voted Britain's best in 2022, and on which you can even find remains of anti-tank defences placed all along the Northumberland coast during the Second World War, when it was feared Hitler could invade Britain via the northeast's flat and expansive beaches. Elsewhere you'll find a beautiful village green in the shadow of the castle, a number of historic houses, shops and pubs along Main Street, memorials to the local hero Grace Darling, and St Aidan's Church, one of the oldest churches of all in northern England. Number 1. Heptonstall, West Yorkshire. There are hundreds of beautiful villages around the UK that you must visit if you get the chance, but one that I can't recommend highly enough is the magical village of Heptonstall, situated high up on top of a legendarily steep hill in West Yorkshire's Calder Valley. Home to around 1,000 people, Heptonstall's cobbled streets are almost entirely silent day and night, and it's a place where you can stroll between an array of beautiful historic houses, take in views across the surrounding valleys and moors, and inspect a number of intriguing local landmarks, from the old village well to the grave of the author Sylvia Plath. Hidden between all the houses in the middle of the village, however, you'll find Heptonstall's parish churchyard, home to not one, but 2 historic churches, the 19th century St Thomas's and the ruins of the 12th century St Thomas a Becket Church. Once upon a time a grand place of worship that could hold over 1,000 people, the ruins of Heptonstall St Thomas a Becket Church are hauntingly beautiful, and you can explore them in close detail as you step carefully around the church's ruined interior in the shadow of its historic clock tower. Heptonstall is one of the most beautiful and peaceful villages you'll find in the country. But as we've seen from this list, there are plenty of villages of all different shapes, sizes and landscapes to see around the UK. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you're looking forward to making a trip to one of these villages for yourself sometime soon.